At 2 a.m., his phone lit up. He flipped it face down, thinking I was asleep. From that moment, I knew something dark was happening behind my back. I used to think I knew my husband better than I knew myself. After 12 years of marriage, you come to rely on the small patterns. The way he clears his throat before speaking when he's nervous. The ritual of dropping his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door. The half smile he gives when he wants something but doesn't want to ask outright. Those patterns were the rhythm of my life, and I found comfort in their predictability. But then, one night, the rhythm faltered. It started small. He began working late. At first, I didn't question it. His company had been struggling, and overtime wasn't unusual. But then late became very late. 10 o'clock. Midnight. Once, nearly 2 in the morning. Each time, his explanations grew thinner, his words more hurried, like a child making excuses. A client meeting ran over. The traffic was impossible. We had to finish a proposal. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But lies have a taste, bitter and metallic, and I could feel them coating my tongue every time he spoke. Then came the phone. He had always been careless with it, leaving it on the counter or the coffee table. Suddenly, it was glued to him. He took it into the bathroom when he showered. He slept with it under his pillow. The first time I asked why, he laughed too loudly and said, "Work stuff, you know. Confidential. Confidential." That word dug into me like a thorn. I started noticing other things. His shirts smelled faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, something floral, too sweet. He shaved more often, started wearing cologne on days he claimed he was just in the office. One evening, as I folded laundry, I found a faint lipstick smudge on the collar of his white shirt. My hands trembled as I held it up to the light, and for the first time in years, I felt the earth tilt beneath me. But the real crack came on a rainy Thursday night. He said he was at a dinner meeting. I sat on the couch, pretending to read, while the storm outside battered the windows. At 11:42 p.m., his phone lit up on the coffee table. He'd left it behind. My breath hitched. The screen glowed with a message preview. "Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was perfect. Same time next week?" My hands shook as I picked it up. I shouldn't have looked, but of course I did. The message was from S. My stomach dropped. My best friend since high school, Sophie. Sophie, who had been in my life longer than he had. Sophie, who stood beside me as my maid of honor. Sophie, who had dried my tears after breakups, who had promised me we'd grow old together, laughing over wine and bad television. Sophie, who had spent countless evenings in my house, sipping wine at my kitchen table, teasing my husband with the familiarity of someone I thought I could trust with my life. I scrolled through the messages, each one a blade. "You looked incredible tonight. She doesn't suspect a thing, does she? I want you all to myself." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I forced myself to keep reading, to choke down every poisonous truth. Their affair wasn't new. The messages went back months. They spoke of stolen afternoons, of excuses made, of plans for a future that didn't include me. My hands went cold. I remember sitting there in the dim light of the living room, the storm raging outside, my own pulse hammering in my ears, and realizing that my entire world had been built on sand. It wasn't just my husband's betrayal, it was hers. The woman I had trusted with every secret, who knew my fears, my weaknesses, my dreams. Together, they had taken the sharpest knife and driven it into my back. The front door opened at 12:15. He came in, damp from the rain, humming as though he hadn't just obliterated my heart. He dropped his keys in the bowl with that same familiar clink. For a moment, I thought I would scream, that I would throw the phone in his face and demand the truth. But the sound caught in my throat. Instead, I watched him move through the room, peeling off his jacket, loosening his tie. He smiled at me, and I managed to smile back, though my jaw ached with the effort. He kissed my forehead lightly, too lightly, and headed upstairs to shower. I sat there, staring at the phone still in my hand, and a strange calm settled over me. The kind of calm you feel right before a storm breaks, unnatural, eerie, electric. Because in that moment, I understood something. They thought they had fooled me. They thought I was blind. But now I saw everything with razor clarity. And if Sophie wanted my life, if my husband thought he could give it to her, then they had no idea who they were dealing with. The morning after I discovered the truth, I woke up with the weight of two worlds crushing my chest. One was the world of my marriage, the one everyone saw, polished, enviable, whole. The other was the hidden one, the festering wound beneath the surface, the one I now carried alone. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of my husband in the shower. Every splash of water felt like an insult. I imagined him washing away Sophie's scent, her touch, her lipstick. My throat tightened. I had always thought that if he ever betrayed me, I would leave immediately, slam the door behind me, burn every bridge. But instead, I was paralyzed. Because it wasn't just him. It was her. Sophie. The thought of her name made bile rise in my throat. She had been the constant in my life, the anchor before him and, I thought, after him. We had shared secrets whispered under blankets during sleepovers, plans scribbled in journals about the men we would one day marry, the children we might have. She knew my first crush, my first heartbreak, the nights I cried myself to sleep in college. And she was there on the happiest day of my life, holding my bouquet, beaming at me as though my joy were hers. How could she? I tried to summon anger only at him, but the wound Sophie left was different, deeper, almost unbearable. He was my husband, yes, but husbands are chosen, fallible. Sophie was supposed to be forever. Her betrayal shattered not only my trust, but the very narrative of my life. I moved through the day like a ghost. At breakfast, he kissed my cheek, and I resisted the urge to recoil. At work, I smiled and nodded, though every email, every meeting blurred into meaningless noise. By evening, I found myself standing in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, staring out the window at the garden Sophie and I had planted one spring. Lavender, roses, hydrangeas, all chosen with laughter, with plans of summer evenings sipping wine on the patio. I wanted to rip every root from the ground, burn the soil, erase her from every corner of my life. But I didn't. Instead, I poured another glass of wine and closed my eyes, memories flooding and unbidden. The three of us together, dinners at my house, game nights where Sophie and my husband teased each other like siblings. Vacations where she tagged along, always the third wheel, though she joked about it with ease. I remembered one night at the beach, the bonfire crackling, Sophie curled under a blanket beside me, his arm around my shoulders. We had sung badly, laughed too much, drunk cheap champagne straight from the bottle. I had thought myself the luckiest woman alive. Now I saw it differently. Every smile between them, every inside joke, every glance, they weren't innocent. They were threads, weaving a tapestry of betrayal right before my eyes, one I had been too blind to see. The rage burned hotter. At night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with them. I wondered if he whispered to her the same words he whispered to me. I wondered if she looked at him with the same affection I once believed was mine alone. My imagination became my torturer, conjuring scenes I could not silence. Their hands tangled in the dark. Their laughter as they stripped away their guilt with their clothes. I clenched my fists until my nails dug crescent moons into my palms. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hurl plates against the wall, to confront them both, to burn everything to ash. But the more the fury swelled, the more a different, colder thought crept in. Confrontation would give them power. It would free them. If I screamed, if I raged, if I left, they would have what they wanted, each other. Perhaps even with my dignity handed to them on a silver platter. They would whisper about me later, consoling each other with the idea that I was weak, that they had triumphed. No, that would not be my ending. I looked at him as he slept beside me, chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm, and for the first time in my life, I did not see the man I had loved. I saw an opponent. I saw Sophie the same way, a rival who had underestimated me. And in that moment, amid the ache and the fury, a seed was planted. I would not confront them. I would not cry in front of them or beg or demand answers that could never satisfy me. Instead, I would watch. I would wait. I would sharpen my silence into a weapon so fine they would never see it coming until it cut them open. For now, I would play my part. I would smile at Sophie, embrace her when she came over, pour her wine as though she were still my friend. I would kiss my husband goodnight, laugh at his jokes, fold his shirts. I would become the perfect wife, the perfect friend, so perfect they would never suspect the storm I was preparing. I lay awake long into the night, hatred and grief twisting in my chest like twin snakes. But beneath it all, there was something new, something that almost frightened me with its intensity. Resolve. They thought they had destroyed me, but they had only transformed me. And when the time came, they would learn what it meant to betray the woman who had nothing left to lose. The strange thing about betrayal is how quickly you learn to wear a mask. I had always thought of myself as transparent, too honest for deception. But within days of discovering the truth, I became an actress in my own home, flawless, convincing, terrifyingly skilled. I practiced in front of mirrors when no one was watching, the easy smile, the light laugh, the casual brush of my hand against his arm. I became her best friend again, the one who poured the wine and shared secrets. I rehearsed lines in my head, making sure my voice never cracked, that no shadow of rage slipped into my tone. And it worked. My husband looked at me with relief, as though my calm presence absolved him of his late nights and guarded phone. Sophie, too, seemed reassured. When she came over for dinner, she laughed and leaned close to him, but she also met my gaze, searching for signs of suspicion. I gave her none. I smiled, I clinked glasses with her, I asked about her week. If she saw anything in my eyes, she mistook it for warmth. Inside, though, I was cataloging every detail. Every touch that lingered too long. Every shared glance when they thought I wasn't looking. Every text notification I managed to glimpse when his phone lit up beside him. I began keeping a private journal, dates, times, scraps of evidence. At first, it felt obsessive, but soon I realized it gave me a strange sense of control. The more I recorded, the less they could take from me. I also learned to play subtle games. I would kiss him passionately before he left the house, knowing he would carry my lipstick with him. I would casually mention Sophie to him at night, telling him how lucky I felt to have her as my best friend, watching the flicker of guilt pass across his eyes before he swallowed it down. With Sophie, I dropped comments designed to unnerve her, small things, harmless on the surface. "You and Daniel always laugh at the same jokes," I'd say with a smile. "Sometimes I think you two understand each other better than I do." She would freeze for a heartbeat, then laugh too loudly, denying what I hadn't accused her of. Those cracks in their armor kept me alive. But the longer I played, the more I began to see something chilling. Sophie didn't just want him. She wanted me. Not in the way I once thought, back when we were young and inseparable. This was darker. She wanted my life. My house. My place in his bed. My reflection in the eyes of our friends and family. It was there in the way she complimented the furniture I had chosen, the way she looked around my kitchen as though measuring how it would feel to call it hers. Once, I caught her slipping into my bedroom uninvited, sitting at my vanity as if trying on my skin. I said nothing. I simply stood in the doorway, smiling as she startled and laughed it off. "Just admiring your perfume," she said, spritzing a little on her wrist. But I saw it. The hunger. The audacity. It chilled me, but it also fed me. Because now I knew the game wasn't just about him. It was about both of them. And that gave me more power than either of them could imagine. I began planting small seeds of doubt. I'd leave my phone unlocked on the table with fake messages from a man's name they didn't recognize, harmless messages, but just enough to spark curiosity. I noticed how quickly my husband's eyes darted toward the screen, how Sophie leaned slightly closer to read. I wanted them uneasy, unbalanced, wondering if their perfect illusion might crumble. At night, I lay beside him, resting my head on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. He kissed my hair and whispered that he loved me. And I whispered it back, though the words tasted like ash. He thought he was safe. He thought I was blind. But every whisper, every kiss was another mask I wore, another step toward the moment I would tear their world apart. The strangest part? I began to enjoy it. There was a thrill in outplaying them, in controlling what they believed. I would stand in the kitchen pouring Sophie a glass of wine, knowing she was sleeping with my husband, knowing she thought she was clever, and yet she laughed at my jokes, complimented my cooking, confided in me. She had no idea that every word she spoke only sharpened the knife I was keeping hidden. And then came the moment that confirmed what I had already suspected. It was a Sunday afternoon. Sophie and I sat on the patio, sipping rose, the sunlight warm on our shoulders. My husband was inside, supposedly watching the game. Sophie leaned back, her eyes scanning the yard, and sighed. "You have such a beautiful life," she said softly, almost wistfully. "The house, the garden, Daniel. It's like something out of a storybook." I smiled, sipping my wine. "I suppose I'm lucky." She turned her eyes to me, and there was something in them I had never seen before. Not envy, possession. "If I had what you had," she murmured, "I'd never let it go." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and deliberate. I kept my smile, but inside, my stomach twisted. There it was. The confession, not spoken but undeniable. She didn't just want my husband, she wanted my life. I laughed lightly, breaking the tension. "Careful, Sophie. You make it sound like you'd steal it all from me." She laughed too, a little too quickly, shaking her head. "Of course not." But I saw the truth. That night, lying awake beside him, I realized the game had shifted. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore, it was about identity. She wanted to erase me, to step into my place as though I had never existed. And I swore to myself, in the silent darkness of our bedroom, that I would never allow it. I would let her dream. I would let him believe. I would keep playing my part, smiling, laughing, loving. But behind the mask, I was building something far greater than suspicion or doubt. I was building a performance so flawless, so devastating, that when the curtain finally fell, they would be left shattered. And Sophie would learn that wanting my life was the most dangerous desire she had ever dared to have. Revenge didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like smoke seeping under a door, invisible until the air was already poisoned. I began with small moves, tiny fractures in the fragile glass world Sophie and Daniel thought they'd built. First, I armed myself with their secrets. One night, while Daniel slept, I synced his messages to my phone. From then on, I became their silent witness. Every stolen kiss, every "I miss you," every lie he told her about me, delivered neatly into my hand. They thought they were clever. They thought I was blind. Instead, I had their whole affair in black and white. With knowledge came power. I didn't lash out, I nudged. A hotel receipt I left in plain sight, then laughed off when he nervously asked if I'd noticed. A casual mention of couples counseling at dinner, watching Sophie's fork freeze, Daniel's jaw tighten. Harmless on the surface. But each seed I planted grew into doubt, guilt, fear. Yet whispers weren't enough. I wanted them off balance. And so I looked toward Sophie's husband, Mark. Mark was the opposite of Daniel, quiet, steady, almost invisible in Sophie's orbit. She rarely spoke of him, except to complain that he was boring. But he wasn't boring, he was faithful. He adored her. And the irony of it made me smile. Because the one man she dismissed was the very man I could take from her if I wished. I started with kindness. Small conversations, touches that lingered a second longer than necessary. Compliments he wasn't used to hearing. At a neighborhood barbecue, I pressed a cold beer into his hand, letting my fingers graze his. His eyes flicked to mine, startled by something he hadn't expected. That night, Sophie called me, laughing too hard. "You and Mark seemed close today." I laughed with her, soft and innocent. "He's easy to talk to." "You're lucky, Sophie." The pause that followed was worth more than champagne. I wasn't chasing Mark for desire. He was proof that nothing Sophie valued was safe. She had stolen my husband. I could dangle hers like a ripe fruit. Whether I ever bit into it or not didn't matter. What mattered was that she felt the possibility, that she imagined it, feared it. Meanwhile, Daniel grew uneasy. I kissed him more, whispered plans for a weekend getaway, laughed at his jokes. He wrote to Sophie afterward, confessing his panic. "She's being so sweet. I feel like she knows." Sophie soothed him with lies of her own. "She doesn't suspect." Just hold on a little longer. But I knew better. Because while they were busy clinging to each other in secret, I was tightening the strings one by one until they were tangled in a web they couldn't escape. And here's what thrilled me most. I began to enjoy it. The mask, the lies, the control, it was intoxicating. I was no longer the broken wife or the betrayed friend. I was the playwright, and they were trapped in a story I was writing, oblivious to the ending I had already prepared. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The night of their downfall was almost beautiful. I chose my stage carefully, our anniversary party. 12 years together, celebrated in the company of friends, neighbors, and family. Sophie, of course, was invited. She wouldn't have missed it for the world. She thought she was safe, still hidden behind shadows and excuses. She thought she would sit at my table, drink my wine, and smile at the man who was hers in secret. But I had prepared something far better than a party. The house glowed with candles and soft music. I wore a crimson dress that clung to me like fire, one I knew would draw every eye the moment I entered the room. My hair fell loose around my shoulders, my lips painted the same red as the wine I carried. I looked like power incarnate, and I wanted them both to see it. Daniel was tense from the start. I caught the nervous flicker in his eyes as I touched his arm, the way he checked his phone every few minutes. Sophie tried to play her role, laughing, mingling, but her laughter was too bright, too forced. They were both unraveling, even before the curtain rose. And then it began. I tapped my glass for silence. The chatter quieted. Smiling, I thanked everyone for coming, spoke of love, of loyalty, of the years we had built together. My voice was steady, my gaze warm, though inside my heart pounded like a drum. Daniel relaxed, believing for one final moment that I was the fool he needed me to be. Sophie's shoulders eased, her eyes shining with false pride in her stolen man. Then I gestured toward the large screen I had set up for a slideshow of memories. The guests clapped politely as photos of our wedding appeared, then holidays, birthdays, moments that looked like happiness frozen in time. Until the images changed. The next slide was not a family photo. It was a screenshot. Daniel's words to Sophie, "Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was perfect." Gasps filled the room. Another slide, Sophie's reply, "One day soon, she'll be gone, and we'll have everything." The murmurs grew louder. Faces turned. Someone dropped a glass. Daniel stood frozen, pale, his mouth opening but no words coming. Sophie covered her lips with her hand, eyes wide, shaking her head as though denial could erase the truth displayed for all to see. Slide after slide, message after message. Every secret they thought they had hidden, I laid bare beneath the soft glow of candlelight and champagne flutes. My evidence was undeniable. Their affair spread open like a wound for everyone to witness. I let it linger. I let them squirm, exposed in front of friends who had once admired them, neighbors who now whispered, family whose faces had turned to stone. Finally, I spoke. Calmly. Almost gently. "I wanted to share these tonight," I said, my smile never faltering, "because marriage is about honesty. And so is friendship. After all, what's the point of celebrating loyalty if it doesn't exist?" The silence was deafening. Daniel stammered, reaching for me, but I stepped back, my dress sweeping the floor like fire as I moved. Sophie whispered my name, pleading, but I didn't even glance at her. I raised my glass once more, toasting the stunned room. "To truth," I said. My voice was clear, ringing like glass shattering. "To freedom." And I drank. The room erupted, gasps, whispers, accusations. Sophie fled first, her heels clattering against the tile, her face blotched with humiliation. Daniel followed, calling after me, but the crowd closed around him, their eyes filled with disgust. I stood among them, calm, radiant, untouchable. For the first time since I discovered their betrayal, I felt whole. They were broken. Exposed. Their secret had become their prison, and I was the one who held the key. And as I looked into the sea of shocked faces, I knew one thing with perfect clarity. This was not the end. This was only the beginning of their ruin. In the days that followed the party, the fallout spread like wildfire. Daniel tried to come back home that night, pounding on the door until his fists must have ached. I didn't answer. I sat upstairs with a glass of wine, listening to his muffled apologies, his promises, his pathetic sobs. For 12 years, I had believed his words. Now, I savored the sound of them bouncing off locked doors, powerless. Eventually, his voice cracked, and he left. That was the last time he ever crossed the threshold of my home. By morning, the world knew. Gossip doesn't need encouragement when the story is this delicious. Our friends whispered, neighbors stared, coworkers called it unbelievable. Sophie's name spread like poison. Daniel's reputation crumbled overnight. She stopped coming to the gym we once shared. He avoided the office, pretending to work from home. Their secret love, once intoxicating to them, had turned into a public disgrace. And me? I walked with my head high. The first time I saw Sophie after the party, she looked like a ghost. Hollow-eyed, shoulders hunched, hair unkempt. She tried to speak to me outside a cafe, her lips trembling as she said my name. I smiled, not cruelly, but with a serenity she could never understand, and walked past without a word. She had taken so much from me, but I had taken something from her she would never reclaim, her dignity. Daniel fared no better. His family, furious at his betrayal, cut ties. He lost a major client at work when the scandal reached the wrong ears. I didn't even need to lift a finger. His downfall was self-inflicted, accelerated by the truth I had set free. He begged me for another chance through long, rambling emails, promises of therapy, of starting over, of building trust again. Each message was more desperate than the last. I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, I met with a lawyer. The divorce was clean, swift, devastating for him. I took my share of the assets, including the house Sophie once admired so much. I made sure to keep the things she envied most, the life she had dreamed of stealing. She had imagined stepping into my world. Instead, I locked her out of it forever. But victory wasn't only in what I destroyed. It was in what I reclaimed. I bought new dresses, bold and bright, the kind I'd never worn when I was trying to please him. I cut my hair, sharp and elegant, like a blade. I traveled to Paris, to Rome, to places I had always wanted to see but never did because he said it wasn't the right time. Standing on bridges over foreign rivers, tasting food that melted on my tongue, I felt something I hadn't in years, alive. The more distance I put between myself and them, the clearer everything became. They had thought they'd broken me. But betrayal had stripped me of illusions, burned away weakness, and left something harder, stronger, more brilliant than before. And sometimes, when I allowed myself the indulgence, I imagined them together now. Not in passion, but in ruin. Sophie, realizing that the man she risked everything for was no prize, only a coward stripped of respect. Daniel, realizing that the woman he destroyed his life for was a hollow shadow who would never be me. Two broken people clinging to each other out of desperation, not love. That was the sweetest part of all. Because I didn't just end their affair, I ended the fantasy that had fueled it. They had dreamed of a future where I was gone, erased, forgotten. Instead, I became the ghost in their lives, the one they could never escape, the reminder of everything they had lost. And I was free. One evening, months later, I stood in the garden Sophie and I once planted together. The lavender was blooming, its scent soft in the air. For the first time, I didn't see her when I looked at it. I saw myself rooted, resilient, beautiful despite the storms. I closed my eyes, lifted my face to the setting sun, and breathed deeply. This wasn't just revenge. This was rebirth. And it was only the beginning. Their happiness was an illusion. I gave them everything, every piece of evidence, every truth, and they fell into their own trap. And I moved forward without looking back.